Today I have a really fun scrap plywood project for you. If you're like me, you probably save every single piece of scrap plywood. I have these pieces left over from when I made the plywood headboard. They were mostly triangular and I knew I wanted to make something cool with them. I also had a blank wall in my workshop and I had been trying to come up with some sort of shelving and decor idea. And then one day inspiration struck and I made this plywood organizer using all my scrap plywood. So we have a pegboard plywood, which is really popular right now, but it's made of two different pieces of plywood, and a magnetic memo board using the scrap plywood. I played around with the scrap pieces until I came up with a configuration I like best. You really can use any shape or size of plywood. Just make sure that they are at least 20 inches wide because you want to be able to attach them to the studs. I liked how two of the pieces looked like they came from a single piece broken in the middle, and I used that for the pegboard. To make sure I could calculate the exact spacing, I used a scrap 1x2 as a spacer. With everything in place, I measured and marked the grid. I made a 4-inch square grid, so 4-inch marks vertically and horizontally. Once I had one plywood marked, I extended the grid to the other piece, taking into account the 3/4 inch gap. Then I went ahead and made the holes. I started with a pilot hole with thin drill bits, and then I used a 3/4 inch spade bit. I really should have used a Forstner bit for cleaner holes, but make mistakes and learn. To mount, I attached a couple of 1x2s to the studs, making sure that they were level. I added a few finished nails to hold them in place first. The 1x2s needed to be such that they were completely covered up by the plywood pieces and didn't interfere with any of the pegboard holes. And then I went back with 3-inch screws. Then I leveled the plywood and added a few nails to hold it in place because doing this with two hands is hard. And then I came back with screws. With the first one in place, I repeated the same process for the second one. I had to find the best way to attach the 1x2s so they hit the studs and got covered with the plywood too. So it ended up being two vertical pieces. I made sure that the plywood pieces were aligned and so were the holes. And then I attached the second sheet. Then I erased all the pencil marks, gave it a quick sand, and added edge banding. Now I really should have added the edge banding before mounting it to the wall, but I was just making this up as I went along. I realized that instead of trying to get my huge iron into the corners, I could actually use the Cricut Easy Press Mini, which was perfect for the job. I trimmed the excess edge banding off, lightly sanded the edges to make them smooth, and I stained them in a nice warm color. I used a 1x3 board which I was going to use as a shelf to estimate the length of the pegs. And then I cut up a 3/4 inch dowel to make a whole bunch of pegs. I stained them to match the pegboard. And then painted the tips in the colors I had used for my accent wall. Now for the magnetic board. I originally saw Tamar from 3x3 Custom make something like this a couple years ago using wood slices. I made a 2-inch square grid across the triangular plywood. Then I made 3/4 inch wide holes, making sure I didn't go all the way down. I stopped as soon as the top surface of the bit became level with the plywood. This left about a 1/4 inch thick plywood behind in the holes. This time I used a Forstner bit for a nice clean holes. Now if you make a plywood pegboard, be sure to use this too. To attach the magnets, I used super glue and dropped them in. I used another magnet on the back to hold it in place while it dried. You want to make sure that all the magnets are oriented in the same direction as you drop them in. If they're not, you will have a tough time getting magnets to attach on the front side as they would bounce around due to the different poles. This time I added edge banding before mounting it to the wall. I stained the plywood and then I mounted it. To mount, you want to make sure that you hit the studs, but you also want to make sure that you don't try to drill through the magnets. So placing magnets in the front helped me determine where to add the screws. I added shelves on the pegboard and a little bit of decor mixed in with some tools because I really wanted this to be as functional as decorative. I love how the magnetic plywood turned out. The magnets stick pretty well. They automatically slide into the spot with the magnet. I was hoping to use it for my bits, but it isn't magnetic enough. But I can use a magnet and then add the bits on top of it. Or just use it to hold my cut lists or drawings. I did end up using only 3 pieces from the original configuration because it started to look a little too busy. I have a few more magnets left and I think I can make a few more of these magnetic boards for my office or my daughter's room. And now here is another scrap plywood project, or you might like this project, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button.